Good evening and welcome, friends, to our Friday evening monk chat. This is a time when the lay community, or really actually anyone, is if there are any monks in the chat, you're also welcome to chat, leave questions, and so this is our monk chat, our program where we will have the folks watching. You're welcome to leave questions. Any questions related to the Buddha, related to the teachings of the Buddha, or related to monks or monasticism or meditation, or things that are tangential, directly on topic to what a Buddhist monk would be talking about, then you are welcome to leave questions related to those topics in the chat. And if there is time permitting, so if there are up till about 9 p.m., we will have the live stream going. And if there are no questions before then we'll close at that time. So it's either until time permits or until the questions run out. And so I hope that you're all doing well. And I see greetings and welcomes from Karen and Lydia in the live audience here. Sean, Cows our friend, Bhumika, Gregory, Maria, Manal, Chad, Richard, and another Maria, looks like. So hello to all of you, and anyone else who might be watching this live without commenting, or anyone else who might be watching the recorded version of this. And I do believe that there are probably some silent lurkers watching who hello to you as well, who do not get mentioned. And so at this time I will render homage to the Buddha, our original teacher, and the reason that we have access to this type of gathering. And after expressing our respect and gratitude to the Buddha, then we can go ahead and take a look at the different questions here. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang saranang gacchami. And hello also to Torah. Hello, Torah. Lots of friends coming. Okay. And Karen just leaving a comment showing gratitude and appreciation. That's very kind of you, Karen. I'm really, really happy to hear that the teachings that are being offered have been helpful and beneficial to you. So sadhu to your gratitude and your comment. And it looks like our first question is from Richard. And Richard, I imagine that there probably are not any Buddhist monasteries in Bolivia. I don't think that there are hardly any Theravada monasteries in South America at all. There's one Ajahn Chah branch monastery in Brazil. And there are probably, I know that there is probably some, there's a Thai and I believe a Laotian temple in Argentina. So there's probably maybe some kind of Thai or Lao, Cambodian or Sri Lankan, some kind of temple maybe in other countries of South America, but I'm not sure about Bolivia. So I hope that if you're not able to find community, I'm glad that you have some online connection here. And you say, let's see, the second right effort is to destroy or to dispel or to get rid of unwholesome arisen qualities and thoughts. But how to do this in practice? Could it be, for example, literally getting rid of some external objects, like an ex-partner's gift that makes arise in one's mind unwholesome thoughts? Okay, so good question. So talking about the second factor of right effort, and so for those who may be less familiar, and the Buddha gave a list of practices, right? A list of qualities and avenues, areas of our life that we should develop and cultivate and work within if we want to attain peace, if we want to attain higher knowledge, if we want to attain awakening and the ending of suffering. And in that collection of practices called the Noble Eightfold Path, or in Pali it's called the Ariya-tangika Magga, in that scheme, there is the sixth factor, which is Samma Vayama, often translated as right effort. And then you also have another identical list called the four correct or right strivings, the Chattaro Samapadhana, so another Pali term, and that is the exact same, the Buddha defines that exactly the same way as he defines right effort. Just like you have, for example, the 4 kinds of mindfulness meditation, which the Buddha uses to define samasati, right mindfulness, right? So yes, in the Noble Eightfold Path, in the Buddha's description of the path, the 6 factors right effort, and right effort has 4 aspects, right? 4 aspects of striving, 4 aspects of purifying our mind. And the second one of those is to remove arisen unwholesome states. So it's defined as upananang, papakanang, kusalanang, dhammanang, anupadaya, chandang janeti vaimati, vidyang aravati, chittang paganhati, padahati. So for the non-arising, for the removal, actually it's pahanaya, I think. Yeah, pahanaya. Yeah, so it's for the abandoning of arisen unwholesome states, bad unwholesome states. So it is important to say, here the Buddha, in this definition, he actually doesn't say destroy them. That's a bit of a strong term, but there are other places where he does use that type of language. So it's not necessarily wrong, but in the second right effort, he actually says they chandang janeti, they generate enthusiasm. Vayamati, they strive. Vidyang arabhati, they arouse energy. Chittang paganhati, they apply their mind. Padahati, and they strive, they exert themselves in order to abandon arisen bad unwholesome states. So, like, for example, right, to make it more concrete, because sometimes these definitions, these stock definitions, can sometimes sound confusing or almost alien, like they don't sound like a modern Dhamma talk. But actually, you'll find that if you look at them closely, they can actually be really, really helpful, really instructional. And very concise, like very to the point. So what is an example of that? Well, for example, let's say that you get angry, or let's say that you become very greedy. Well, once that is arisen in your mind, then you want to put forth effort to remove it, right? Not to tolerate it, but to remove the greed, to remove the anger or delusion. If you notice delusion or confusion, to remove that. So the idea being that we're trying to abandon it, right? So like if you have, for example, a bunch of ants come into your pantry, then you want to get rid of them, right? But you have to do it properly, right? So you don't want to kill them as a Buddhist, but you want to get rid of them, and there's a proper procedure to do that. So the right effort, the Buddha says the first one is to avoid, to make for the unarisen bad states, so things that have not arisen yet, to prevent them from arising. So that's like before the ants get in the house, you want to prevent them, right? So, for example, keeping the kitchen clean, blocking off any normal entrances. Like if you leave the doors open with a bunch of sugar in the house, it's very likely that the ants are going to get in. So you need to put forth an effort, right, to prevent ants. If you want to prevent ants from getting in, you have to put forth effort before they're even there. It doesn't begin once they're in there. That's actually already, ideally, they don't get in the first place, right? Or, for example, a wasp's nest or something like that. So you put forth effort. You seal off the house. You clean up the sugars. You close the jars. You make sure that things are not easily accessible. And you try your best to prevent them from getting in there. That's the first right effort. So things like anger, greed, stinginess, and so on, you try to prevent those from even entering. But if they do get in, then there's a second right effort, which is you try to abandon them. So then once the ants are in, once the wasps are nested up, then you try to get rid of them. So currently we have some birds. Excuse me. We have some birds in the chimney here, which periodically you might be hearing on the live stream, or some kind of animal is in there. I'm not sure what it is. Chimney swifts. So we have some chimney swifts. And so we probably need to put forth some effort to remove those, non-violently remove them, which we have not done yet. So yeah, but you have to do it properly. And so you're asking, what about external objects? You say, well, first, how to do this in practice, and what about literally getting rid of external objects? So one thing that's important to keep in mind is if you have a bunch of ants getting in the house, and so then your plan of action to remove them, let's say that you take up the plan of killing them one by one. Actually, that won't work. Like, it's apart from being immoral, it actually won't stop the ants from getting in because there's more ants outside. And so the reason that they're getting in is because of the scent trails and the food that's in there. So if you start just killing the ants, it actually won't stop the ants, right? They'll just keep, the more will come from outside. So like you won't actually be finished with them. So you have to do the proper procedures to remove the ants. It's not just a matter of killing them. That won't actually do it, right? That won't do the trick. And so when we have unwholesome states, if our attitude is like obliterate it, make it in the sense of like we just want to immediately remove it from our mind, like we don't want it to be there. And so out of a sense of aversion, we immediately try to annihilate the presence of that state, that quality. That actually most of the time it won't work unless it's very weak. So like, for example, if you are, it won't be long term. So like you're basically distracting yourself, right? So like if you have the ants in the kitchen and you kill them all off, again, not recommended, but let's say you kill them all off and then you remove the ants, the dead bodies, then you might feel contented because you think, oh, there's no more ants in here. But actually it's only temporary. You basically just distracted yourself from the problem of the ants. You haven't actually resolved the problem, right? So in the same way, if you have some kind of anger or lust or whatever, if you try to distract yourself from it by as quickly as possible, not making it something that doesn't appear to your mind. So like imagine it's a picture, you try to quickly as possible remove the picture. Then actually that will just be kind of distracting. It won't actually be resolving the problem. Like why did it arise in the first place? What was going on there? You didn't really abandon it. You just kind of moved your mind away from it. So temporarily that can be okay. If it's very severe, it's better to distract yourself. If it's very severe, like it's going to cause you to act unwholesomely, then you might want to just immediately redirect and try to annihilate it because otherwise it might overpower the mind, right? But ideally what we want to do is we want to do something more skillful, and that is we want to stop feeding it. So why are the ants there? Because they're eating. Or if you have a bunch of wild animals coming around and you're feeding them, then it's no wonder that they're coming around. So the reason that these unwholesome states arise is because we feed them, right? We feed them with our intentions, we feed them with our directed perceptions and so on. And so we're actively creating them, actively feeding them, like feeding ants or feeding animals. And so how do we get them to go away? It's not by killing the animals and then continuing to throw out the food. Like more animals will just come. What you do is you stop throwing out the food. You don't actually need to treat the animals. The animals will go away of their own accord. You have to treat the causes of why are the animals coming? Why are the ants coming? If there's nothing there, they'll go away. If there's no food, the animals will go away. So you don't need to kill the animals. And so it's the same with these thoughts. Why are they coming? Because we're feeding them, not because of the presence of particular images or thoughts in our mind. So it's important to remember. And so this is why it's important to make a distinction between what we might call like an image in the mind and an intention. They're not the same thing, but they're easily conflated. And the more you observe your mind, the more you'll learn that there is a very important distinction, like a crucial one. And that's if some kind of image, whether words or pictures or whatever appears in your mind, that is different from making an intentional mental choice, right? So like, let's say, for example, that the thought appears in your mind of punching somebody. That's different if you then agree to the thought and you then actively agree that you will punch them in your mind. And then let's say even worse if you then start building on it and planning it, right? So there's a difference between a thought appearing and agreeing to it. And like, it's very normal for thoughts to appear because that's what the mind does. It makes connections. So even if you don't actually want to punch anybody, but like let's say that you've been conditioned, let's say you've been around a bunch of people who keep talking about punching people, it might appear in your mind because your mind just makes that connection. It's been conditioned to think about punching, so then the condition arises and a thought appears like, what if I punch them? But it's different. You can observe it though and see like, did you actively agree to it, or is it just a kind of like a piece of information that the mind is collecting together? Or again, you might have, for example, some kind of annoyance arise, like you get annoyed, and that's one thing. So that's anger arising. And then another thing is then you start actively agreeing and feeding with the anger once it's arisen. And the same thing with lust. So, like, for example, say that you have some desire for someone, and then that's different from actively enjoying the uh, the desire. You see what I mean? Like, you have lust, and then you're not contented with it. You want it to go away. Versus you have lust, and you're actively agreeing to it. You're actively welcoming it, like enjoying it. Or anger, actively welcoming it versus it's present, but you don't want it to be there. You want it to remove it. You want to stop feeding it. So we have to make that distinction between things that we're intentionally agreeing to, we're intentionally approving of in our mind, and things which we're not intentionally agreeing to. And the reason that these unwholesome states come up is because to some extent we're intentionally agreeing to the pleasure or to the gratification of the unwholesome state. And then even worse is if we then are agreeing to the unwholesome state itself. So you mentioned, for example, what about like an ex-partner's gift that makes your mind unwholesome? So maybe some kind of grief or something. So why does that, grief or sadness or anger or frustration or lust, why does that arise? Well, to one extent, it's because your mind is actively still seeking delight in the experience of the person, right? In the experience of the relationship. So if you had no interest in it, it wouldn't be a problem in the first place, right? It's kind of like, let's say that you see someone else's, let's say it's like a jacket or whatever. So like it's your ex-partner's jacket. So let's say that you see a jacket and it doesn't belong to your ex-partner. Then probably it doesn't cause any problems because you're not associating that jacket with something that you're taking personally. It's just a jacket. But when it comes to your partner's jacket, you have a whole story about it. Not just a story, but a story that you are attached to, like you delight in it. You want to derive some kind of pleasure, comfort, or some kind of goodness, some kind of enjoyment, delight out of that jacket. Like memories, actively enjoying the memories, longing for the memories, desiring the memories, being angry and upset or resentful about the memories. So there's a difference, right? The difference between the two jackets. One is a random jacket, one is your ex-partner's jacket. One causes you unwholesome states, one does not. The difference is that your mind is actively welcoming to some extent, even if it's not currently happening. You still have the attitude fundamentally that you do find pleasure in those things. You do delight in those things, right? So that attitude, even when it's not present, that will cause the arising of unwholesome states when the conditions come together. So if your attitude is like, fundamentally, you do derive pleasure from the person, you do enjoy relationships, you do find happiness there, you want them, then every now and then you're not going to be thinking about it. So your mind is not going to be experiencing unwholesome states in relation to that thing, right? You're doing something else. You're having a conversation with your friend. You might not be thinking about it. But as soon as you are stimulated with a thought, like a memory, or with an external stimulus, like an object, as soon as you are stimulated, the unwholesome states will arise. Like the ants will find the sugar and boom, there it is. So it's like you have sugar in the house. It's just a matter of time. When will the ants get in? Right? So like I said, what is the first step? It's removing the sugar before the ants get in. So before you even get to having an unwholesome state, you need to block the mind from taking delight in those things which cause the unwholesome states to arise. Because once they're arisen, it's repair work. And it's really, like, for example, in order to see clearly, then we have to have a mind free of hindrances. So if the hindrances are already arisen, it's going to be that much harder to see clearly. Like you're basically you have to do the work now of purifying them, right? Of that particular one. So it's better if you can prevent it from arising in the first place. Then you don't have to, then you can see clearly, you can develop some insight into that point before the hindrance blocks your progress. So that's where it starts with the first right effort. So you're asking about the second one, but actually the first one is more important. It's the most crucial because then ideally you don't need to worry about the second so much because then they feed into each other. So you need to train yourself that this relationship, for example, is not to be delighted in. So you need to contemplate that it is the nature of relationships, the nature of people as impermanent, as painful, and as impersonal. So, for example, relationships or any kind of personal relation, any kind of personal relationship, people, objects, whatever it is, any kind of attachment, right? That thing you have to contemplate, that is impermanent. Your experience of it is impermanent. And the Buddha says we should reflect again and again, sabbehi me piyehi manapehi nana bhavo vinabhavo. So I will change and lose everything that I love and cherish. I will change and I will be separated and lose everything that I love and cherish. And I'll change. So this is especially relevant, for example, in relationships. You think eventually, either in the past, like this is the nature of your past relationship, or it's the nature of your present one, or it's the nature of your future one. Whether past, present, or future, all relationships, they all have the same nature, which is that you will change and you will be separated from what you love and cherish. So you'll grow old. Let's say that you love reading books. You will grow old. You will change. You will not have good eyesight anymore. You might not be able to read books. You love listening to music. You might become deaf. Or you might find enjoyment from books. You might become depressed and you lose your enjoyment. You enjoy hanging out with friends. You might become anxious, not be possible. So it could be mental or physical. And similarly, the people will also change and you will be separated from them. So your partners might leave you. Your friends might leave you. Your friends might betray you. Your partners might betray you. The things that you love might be lost. They might be burnt. They might be stolen. They might be taken over by someone else, right? So maybe your partner falls in love with someone else, right? So you have to contemplate this. Again, ideally in advance. Of course, you can do it after as well, but ideally in advance. And you have to contemplate that therefore, relationships are painful. They have a nature of being painful. Inherently in the sense that, imagine that you have a hot coal. You pick it up and you burn your hand. Or you have a hot stovetop. You put your hand on it and you burn your hand. Why was your hand burnt? Because the stovetop is hot. So whether you touch it or not, it is hot. That's the nature of it. So relationships, because they are unreliable, then whenever you pick them up, you're going to be picking up just suffering. There's nothing there to be delighted in. So then what's the problem? When you put your hand on something hot, then you get burned. So when you put your hand on something which is painful, then it causes you pain. So don't pick it up. That's why the Buddha says we should drop the craving. Craving is the picking up of suffering. So like, let's say that this is the suffering. Well, the craving is when I pick it up. So now I've picked up suffering. And so now I'm carrying and lugging around a bunch of suffering with me. So the Buddha is saying, set it down. Set down the suffering. Take your hand off the stove. So when you see like, oh, this relationship is dangerous. This relationship, its nature is to cause pain. It will not satisfy. It will actually lead to unpleasant sensation. That's its nature. And so you have to say, then I should not pick it up. I shouldn't pick it up in the first place. I should disengage from that. It is not of interest. And then, of course, you should also contemplate that they are impersonal. Relationships are impersonal. But I don't know, that would take a little bit too much time to talk about for this. So this is a relevant question for everyone, so it's relevant to be addressed a little bit longer. So yeah, so you want to contemplate like that and prevent your mind from delighting in the first place. So then when you see the jacket or whatever the object is, right, as an example, then ideally you won't even have the unwholesome mind state arise because you will have already cleaned the house beforehand. And you'll immediately just think, you might even be relieved that you're not in a relationship. Like sometimes there are stories in the suttas where, for example, Mahamoggallana, he was an arahant, he sees like a ghost, tormented ghost being, and he smiles. And the monk who's with him is thinking like, why is he smiling? And then he goes to the Buddha and he tells the Buddha that he saw this being. He says, it's wonderful, it's marvelous. And he doesn't mean like it's great that they're suffering, right? That would be horrible. That would be a lack of compassion. That would be cruelty. But rather the reason he's smiling, one reason which is given, which is not necessarily the case, but one reason that's given, I believe, in the commentary is that he was reflecting on the fact that he was free of that. Like, look at the state of samsara. Like, it's amazing the diversity of beings. And also possibly maybe he was thinking like, wow, the relief. Anyway, I don't know about him per se, but the point is that sometimes you might see suffering and you might be glad, like, oh, you're relieved that you're not part of that, to whatever extent the suffering is not part of you anymore. And so, yeah, just remember that in time, you will lose your attachment to this thing. And so the objects are not the problem. The problem is your attitude. If you need to remove the objects, that can be okay. If it's really causing a difficulty, sometimes we do need to change our environment. Yes, that's true. But ideally, try to change your attitude through reflection. Otherwise, you're just going to be distracting yourself. So let's say you throw the object away, and then later on you encounter something that you forgot about in your house 10 years later. If you still haven't resolved the attachment, it's just going to cause more suffering. So ideally, you want to resolve your mind, not the external environment. But if you need to, like if it's overpowering, then yes, you can get rid of it. Like if you notice, why am I holding on to this object? Only because of attachment, then you probably should get rid of it because your reasoning is unwholesome. Right? So like let's say you have something and you think like you should get rid of it, but you're just holding on to it because you're attached. Yeah, you should stop. You should get rid of it because you should give it back or whatever, because that's it's only fueling your unwholesome states. So to that extent, it is important to check, what is my motivation for holding on to these things? And so it's always a matter of intention. So when you have the object, you have the sign, you have the mental image, what matters is what is your intention in regards to that? Are you delighting in it, and so on? And then once the thing is arisen, it's the same. So then you try to say, how can I stop feeding this? So the memory might persist. Like the Buddha could remember his past lives. So that means he could also remember all the unwholesome things he did, right? So his being aware of that is not enough to cause unwholesome mind states. The problem is the attitude in regards to it. And so you have to check your attitude, and you want to try to stop feeding that unwholesome attitude. Stop feeding that attitude, which is lamenting or delighting actively, or actively getting angry. And you need to see, this is unwholesome, I am not to feed this. And you're to try to remove your craving or aversion in regards to that mental image, that mental perception, or that physical perception. You're to remove your craving or aversion. The image might remain just as it is. So I hope that that's helpful. Yeah, it's a big topic, so I think that's enough for now. Otherwise, it's going to be going too long. And Greg's talking about Bhante and Aya. I believe that they're doing well. And yeah, I really recommend you all look into the life of Bhante Lokanatha. Very interesting monk. Yeah, he apparently even went to Italy at some point. I think he said in his autobiography, I heard, one of the monks was sharing with me some of it, reading out some of his Dhamma talks, and he was very, he was very powerful speaker. And there's actually a photo you can find of a Venerable Locanata, one of the first, I believe, Italian monastic, one of the very earliest Western monastics in modern times. And you can see a photo of him in Hollywood, I think, or in Los Angeles, in like the 60s maybe, or it might even be before that, in the 40s, or the 20s, I can't remember, but it's he was a while ago, and you can see an old picture though of him in Los Angeles with a bunch of Americans with their hair spread out on the floor for him to walk over the hair. Because so like in Asia, like very holy monks, sometimes people, especially women, they'll put their hair on the floor for the holy person to walk on it. And like this was going on, but it was all American women, which is really, for a lot of Americans, probably you just hear about that and you might be cringing, right? Because in America, there's like, a lot of people really think it'd be really strange, to let someone walk on your hair or something. So yeah, he was very charismatic. I don't know how how that happened, but apparently it did. And he was, I think in his story, he was actually studying. He had family in Italy, but he immigrated to the United States, and he was studying in New York, studying engineering or chemistry, I think actually chemistry. And he said like he read one verse of the Dhammapada and he converted to Buddhism, and then he ended up going to Asia. Like he dropped out, or he read he finished reading the Dhammapada, and then I don't know if it was one verse. I think it was one verse. He said like that convinced him. And then he went to Asia, became a Buddhist monk. Eventually he did like retreats in the mountains, and he was actually believed to have psychic powers. Then he went on to do like a world tour. And then he was the one who converted Dr. Ambedkar. He walked to India from, I believe, Italy or Burma. I think he walked to Burma from Italy. He wanted to convert Mussolini and the Pope. And his family put him in jail. I know he was put in jail because his family told him to disrobe. Otherwise, they wanted him to disrobe, and he wouldn't do it. So they got their friends or whatever to put him in jail. And then in jail, he eventually, decided to leave Italy. He couldn't convert the Mussolini or whatever, and this is at least in some of the biographies. So then he walked, I think, to Burma, all the way from Italy. And then he eventually he heard that Dr. Ambedkar wanted to convert the Dalit community to another religion to help them remove the trauma of being in the caste system, in the Indian caste ideology. And so Dr. Ambedkar heard about this and he was like, we need to bring Buddhism back to India. And so he started a pilgrimage. And while he was walking, he got a bunch of Asian monks, including like forest monks, to follow him on foot, leading this horde of monks walking up to India, where he then talked to Dr. Ambedkar, converted him to, convinced him to take on Buddhism. And apparently in India, he was actually put in a prisoner of war camp by the British, where he then led like a 90-day hunger strike where he didn't eat. And he converted some of the prisoners to Buddhism as well, I think. And I think they eventually released him. So his life is very interesting. He was very passionate, as many Italian, as you might expect from a Southern Italian man. So anyway, yeah, interesting person. You can look into his story. Okay, Ashish is asking, let's see, Devante, do we know why one of the 5 aggregates, sanya or perception, is not mentioned as one of the links to dependent origination? I would have thought that perception is a necessary condition to recognize feelings. Great. So yes, good question, Ashish. So actually perception is indirectly part of dependent origination, because the Buddha says nama rupa, right? Nama rupa is one of the conditions. So what's translated often as name and form, sometimes translated as mind and body or mentality, materiality. So nama rupa, name and form. The Buddha defines what is name, what is nama, what is mentality. It is, let's see if I can get this right. So it is Vedana, Sanya, Chetana, Manasikara, and Phassa. So it is feeling, perception, intention, attention, and contact. So perception is in the definition of name and form. Name and form, and then form is defined as the 4 elements. It's basically, it's the body. So Namarupa is your mental faculties in your body. So it's what you're conscious, it's everything except consciousness, essentially. So you're conscious of and due to and with your mental faculties in your body, right? So consciousness needs to be established in a functioning body with mental faculties, and it needs a body and mental faculties to be aware at all. And also every instance of consciousness is accompanied by mental factors, mental faculties. So like, for example, specifically feeling and perception, there's another sutta which talks about how consciousness, feeling, and perception are intertangled. They're not actually really, it's not possible to separate them out totally. So yes, perception is part of the link of name and form. It's the 4th link in the 12 link list. But it's not listed as a specific condition. There, sanya is referring to the faculty itself, right? The faculty of perception. So like, for example, as I mentioned, feeling is in the definition of name and form. But then later on, you also have feeling after contact, right? And actually, contact is also a name and form. So several of the factors are in name and form, and then some of those are drawn out later. What is the difference? The difference is that name and form is referring to a list of faculties. It's not referring to like particular events. It's referring to the mental faculties themselves. So for example, the faculty of feeling, the faculty of perception, the faculty of intention, attention, and contact. So it's basically the faculties of a working mind. And those 5 factors of name, apologies if this is technical, but you asked. So the 5 faculties of the 5 factors of name, of mentality, they are essentially universal mental factors. So like every time your mind is operating, it will always have some kind of perception, feeling, intention, attention, and contact. In the traditions, that's kind of universally agreed upon in the Buddhist traditions. And that would make sense, why that would be kind of listed by the Buddha, at least to some extent. Of course, we don't need to be too literalist about it. But the basic idea is that, yeah, every time we're conscious, there's going to be some kind of feeling there, some kind of feeling tone, and there's going to be some kind of perception there, even if it's very subtle, right? Even if someone attains someone attains neither perception or non-perception, technically that would be a kind of perception faculty. And so similarly, there's going to be some kind of intention and some kind of attention, even if it's like automatic. And there's going to be some kind of contact, because contact is by definition, the experience of the experience of consciousness. So perception it's in name and form. It means the faculties which are necessarily part of a being who has consciousness. Like in order for there to be consciousness, there's going to need to be those faculties. Later on, when the Buddha mentions feeling in the links, he's drawing out a particular thing, which is like the experience of feeling, not the faculty of feeling, but the actual experience of feeling, if that makes sense. Kind of like the difference between an eye, like having a functioning eyeball, and when your eye actually sees something, right? So there's the faculty of feeling, and then there's the actual experiences of feeling themselves. They're not totally separate, but they're kind of two aspects of the same thing. And so in the later part of the list, when the Buddha is talking about feeling being the condition for craving, or craving being dependent on feeling, there the Buddha is trying to draw out one particular aspect of our life, which is that our craving is dependent on feeling. He's not trying to make like a list of everything that exists. That's not what the 12 links of dependent origination are describing. He's not talking about like what is every possible factor of the mind. That's not what he's describing. Like he is describing what is the condition, what are the conditions, what are the factors which craving, ignorance depend upon, and therefore suffering depend upon. So he's looking at a particular issue. What does suffering depend upon in order to exist? And what do the causes of suffering depend upon in order to exist? So crucially, feeling is there, because crucially, craving depends upon feeling, right? But you can know that whenever there is feeling, there's also perception. So it's not like he's not saying that there's not perception. It's just that he's drawing out that particular connection because that's more relevant. And there are other aspects of dependent origination where the Buddha does teach perception. And actually, you say that you would think that perception is necessary to recognize feelings, but actually in the suttas, generally speaking, feeling is put before perception. So like, for example, when the Buddha describes the dependent origination of sensory contact, so not the dependent origination of samsara, which is the 12 links, but when he describes the dependent origination of sensory contact, there he sometimes does put perception. So for example, say, chakuncha paticca rupecha upajjati chakkavinyang tinang sagati passo pasapatya vedana patya sanya. So independence on the eye and sights arises eye consciousness. The meeting of the three is sensory contact. Dependent on sensory contact, there is feeling, and dependent on feeling, there is perception. And then, for example, in the sutta about papancha, about mental proliferation, Mahakachana then goes on to say, yang sanjanati tang vitaketi, etc. So then what one perceives, that one thinks about. What one thinks about, that one proliferates. And on the basis of that, one is then beset by perceptions, which are perceptions and judgments, which are conditioned by they're beset by concepts and judgments, which are conditioned by their perceptions. So the point is that in some places, when the Buddha or his disciples are specifically drawing out the experience of our senses and the details of that, like how our perception works and how our perception then influences our thoughts and our proliferations, then perception is included in the list, but is usually included after feeling. And I think part of the reason for that is not necessarily temporal. That's important to remember. It's not saying like this is the sequence of events in time, though that can be one aspect of it sometimes. But more crucially, it's talking about what dependency, right? Dependent origination. So it's talking about how things depend on one another. And the idea being that perception more fundamentally depends upon our feeling, right? Because like how you perceive something is a little bit more complicated than just the raw feeling. So our perceptions, they are, generally speaking, they're more complicated concepts. So think like, for example, let's say you perceive a cushion or you perceive a person. That's more complicated than like the the bare feeling, right? The fact that you're feeling that experience. The feeling is more visceral, it's more primordial. The perception is more complicated. So perceptions often depend upon feeling, even if they arise together. And that can be a point of your investigation. Like, you might even perceive something as like, oh, you like that food, you don't like that one. You like that person, you don't like that person. That person is beautiful, that person's ugly. And you notice that those perceptions are actually conditioned by particular feelings, sensations, whether past, future, or present. And then that conditions your craving. And we have some interesting questions about the residence. Victoria says, do you know when Bhante Sudaso is due back from Italy? Should be back July 16th. And does Teddy still live at the monastery? Yes, Teddy does still live at the monastery. The monastic cat. And Julie is asking, okay, in Tibetan Theravada Buddhism, it seems that there are more paranormal or spiritual. Okay, I think you mean in Tibetan Buddhism. It seems that there are more paranormal practices compared to Theravada and the Ajahn Chah lineage, for example. Is this accurate? And am I familiar with why that might be? Okay, yeah, I understand your question. I see why you're asking about that, Julie. You're asking that in Tibetan Buddhism, it seems that they put more emphasis, so there's more stories or more, more. You might hear people talking about different types of psychic, paranormal, spiritual phenomena, like about biographies or masters, or putting emphasis on how one might try to develop those versus Theravada, and you say specifically the Ajahn Chah lineage. I wouldn't necessarily say that that's accurate. In Thai Buddhism, there is a lot of emphasis on psychic phenomena. Like specifically, it seems, like Thai Buddhism is very, there is definitely a lot of that. And that includes the Ajahn Chah lineage. Like Ajahn Chah, for example, basically any disciple of Ajahn Chah, like including people who never met him, but people in his lineage, basically anyone who has faith in Ajahn Chah, they probably believe that he had psychic powers. Like, it's pretty likely. Almost everyone who is considers himself a disciple of Ajahn Chah, probably they think he had psychic powers. Some might be agnostic about it, but most likely they do think that. It's a big point of faith for a lot of people. And then similarly, like relics are a really big part of Buddhism. So like, for example, if you go to like a museum of Ajahn Chah, I bet that they have his relics there. Like even at the monastery, we have a supposed relic of Ajahn Chah, though I don't think it's really a real relic of Ajahn Chah. But it has a picture of him with a tooth relic inside of it. So unless it's symbolic or something. So things like relics, which for those who don't know, the relics are basically when they cremate a body, then often they will collect the remains of the bones, and then often those bones will turn into colored gems, or they will multiply or disappear. And it's actually very common for people to experience that. It's very, very common. And things like relics, which are probably also part of Tibetan Buddhism, if not something similar. And then things like masters who are known for mind reading, right? Masters who are known for levitating, masters who are known for remembering their past lives, masters who are known for seeing other beings like angels and hell beings and talking to beings, and masters who are known for maybe traveling around in some kind of astral body. That's really common to hear about people who are alleged to have those abilities. However, I have been told, I don't know if it's true, but I have been told that in Tibetan Buddhism, they often will almost equate enlightened beings with beings who have psychic powers, or they will sometimes think that beings with psychic powers, that therefore means they're enlightened. I don't know if that's universally true. I don't know if that's true at all. That might be like not true at all. I have heard that. And so it is possible that maybe there is more of a conflation, because the Buddha did say that people can develop psychic powers without being awakened, and people can be awakened without psychic powers. And I think that although it is pretty common for people to, if a master is alleged to have psychic powers, people are very likely to think that they're also awakened. There is often a conflation, but maybe it's not emphasized very much. Like it's more of a belief. It might not be. It might not be emphasized as much as Tibetan Buddhism, but I'm not sure. I can't really speak to that. Now, the Ajahn Chah lineages in the West, some of them might tend towards just because the cultural audience might be different, so they might de-emphasize or not talk about that as much. And Ajahn Chah himself kind of de-emphasized those types of things. Many teachers did. But even things like amulets or protective charms, those are really common in Thailand. So if there was anything more specific, Julie, feel free to ask. And then Trinada is saying, if we don't get a chance to inform prior, can we come on Saturday evening and stay overnight to continue for Sunday programs? Thank you. Generally speaking, we have people stay Friday to Sunday rather than Saturday to Sunday. And also informing is pretty important beforehand. Okay, and then Luisa says, Bhante, do you think that people who don't have kids have less of a chance of coming back to this world as they have less of an attachment to this earth? I think that there are people with kids who have less attachments than people who don't have them. And I think that there are people who don't have kids who have less attachments than people who do have them. I think it really depends on the person. Some people don't have kids because they want to enjoy sensual pleasures more. They don't want to have the burden of taking care of someone else. So they want to, go party and drink or, have travel or whatever. And so that doesn't mean they're less attached. So no, I don't think that there is a correlation. I think that sure, there are probably people who are very attached to their children. And, but that doesn't mean that someone who doesn't have children wouldn't be just as attached to something else. Because at the end of the day, we all have attachment. Like unless we become enlightened, unless we become arahants, then we all have attachment. Everyone has attachment. So it doesn't matter what is in front of you, what objects you have available to you, what experiences you have available to you. If you have attachment, you will be attached. It's kind of like if you have a disease, the problem isn't the symptoms. Like the reason you have symptoms is because you have a disease. So craving and attachment, these are diseases. So the attachments themselves are just the symptoms. So some people, they have the same disease, but they get different symptoms. So it's not the symptoms are actually not the main problem. Like the cause is the disease. So the attachments are just an expression of the particular cravings of each person, but each person has craving, and every person has their ways of expressing that. Okay, then Richard says that he's recently read in the suttas that the Buddha would say that even he would apply some of the right efforts of the Sabbasava Sutta to use, avoid, tolerate, and destroy. So that made you think, what would a Buddha destroy? I don't think that he does say that he would do those things in the Sabbasava Sutta. He might have said that he did do them. But if you have the quote, Richard, I could look at it. You could post it here. But I didn't think he did. But there are places in the suttas, maybe to answer more generally, where the Buddha does say that even he does, for example, practice meditation, in the sense that he, for example, he would attain, he would enter different meditative states that he had access to. And he also says that arahants and so on will continue to be mindful, and they'll continue to do like practices that they don't actually need to do. Because he says that one reason is because for them it's a pleasant abiding, so it's just pleasant, like it's the habit that they have. So, like for example, although the Buddha wasn't, for him, it's not like his mind wouldn't be bothered if he wasn't in some kind of meditative state, but he would experience more pleasure if he was in those. So it's just more easeful for him. So it's not like his mind is bothered one way or the other, but there is a difference between being stabbed all over your body with hot spears, and having him entering a jhana or something. So although his mind would be undisturbed either way, there is a difference for him. So he would, for his own, just for comfort, just for his own leisure, essentially, he would enter meditative states, and he might even do things like walking meditation and so on, just because what else is he going to do? As long as you have a body, like, you have to be doing something. So he might as well just continue being mindful, continue developing meditation. It's not that he needs to do it for his practice, but it's just a pleasant way of living if someone is enlightened, right? Like, if someone is enlightened, then it's better that they do that than they hang out at the gas station and watch people come in and out. It's just either it's not that their mind would be affected, but either way, one of them is just more. They would incline to one of those, right? And then the other reason is out of compassion for future generations. So imagine you have a bunch of alleged arahants and they all basically just sit around doing nothing. That wouldn't be very inspiring. It wouldn't really encourage people, because you would see your role models, and so on. They wouldn't be doing what you're supposed to be doing. So one of the reasons the Buddha says is out of compassion. Like, he keeps up, and the arahants, often they'll keep up doing practices that people in training would be doing, or people who are trying to develop the path would be doing, in order to inspire them, in order to have compassion for them. So, like, the Buddha continued to live like a very diligent monk, one, for his own comfort, and two, because it was a good example. But he wouldn't need to destroy unwholesome mind states. That's just not something that would be possible for him to even do, because he wouldn't have unwholesome mind states. And then Melanie asks, didn't the Buddha already answer the question, is the cosmos eternal, when he said all conditioned things are impermanent? That's a kind of a clever question. So what you're referring to, Melanie, for those who are less familiar, of course, is that the Buddha has a famous list of unanswered questions, undeclared questions, where he doesn't declare, for example, is the cosmos eternal, or is the cosmos not eternal? Is a better word? I prefer the translation universe. I think that's a better, like, is the universe eternal, or maybe, I don't know. Maybe cosmos is okay. I guess they're the same word. Is the universe eternal, not eternal? Is the universe finite or infinite? Is the soul the same as the body, or is the soul something separate from the body? And after death, does an enlightened person continue to exist? Do they cease to exist? Do they both continue and cease to exist, or do they neither continue nor cease to exist? And he didn't declare those. He didn't answer them. And so, but then you say, well, he also is attributed as saying that everything is impermanent, which would imply that the cosmos is impermanent, right? The cosmos is not eternal. But I wouldn't say that, because what he's really referring to what the question of is the cosmos eternal or not is really referring to is more a reference to, like, the cosmos there. It kind of means everything that exists, right? It doesn't mean like our universe, because in Buddhism that is considered impermanent. So our universe, like the cosmos, the current cosmos, yes, it is considered impermanent. Right, so the eon, the cosmos is considered to expand, and like currently it's expanding. Right, that's the opinion of scientists. So in Buddhism, the cosmos for a long time it will be expanding, and eventually it will then be contracting and be destroyed, and then again another one will arise. So yes, the cosmos is not eternal in that way. It's not eternal in that sense. The universe is not eternal. However, what he's referring to with that question is not like, is the universe that we experience, is that permanent or impermanent, but will there continue to be things forever or not? Like, will existence itself, like, will the whole world, not just one eon, 2 eons, but will there always be things going on, or will there not always be things? So the things in and of themselves are, yes, they're all impermanent. But the question is, will those impermanent things continue to arise and cease? Or will there come a time when there will be no more arising? So maybe another way of phrasing it, if you wanted to put it in like really Buddhist terms, is like, is the cosmos, is the universe, will it always continue? Will it always be there, even though it's impermanent, even though the things have been impermanent, or will it not always be there? Right. Similar to the Buddha was asked, like, will everyone attain enlightenment eventually or not? Though maybe not exactly the same. So yeah, it's not exactly the same as our all conditioned things impermanent. But there is a the other kind of aspect of it is that the undeclared questions, they have another, they're not just it's not just agnosticism. So they're actually undeclared for other reasons. Like one of the reasons is that it's just not beneficial to think about them, but that's actually not the only reason. That's actually not the main reason per se. Well, maybe I wouldn't say it's not the main reason, but it's not like the motivating reason. It's not like the Buddha was saying like, oh, this is just a waste of time, um, but there is an answer. But he doesn't declare it because of the questions themselves being flawed. Like the questions themselves are actually unanswerable. They don't lead to a solution, and so for that reason, they're also a waste of time, right? So there are other useless things which the Buddha didn't talk about, but he didn't consider them undeclared points, like unanswered points. So, like for example, the Buddha, he considered, talking about astrology or whatever. He didn't really consider that something that monks should be doing, at least as a livelihood. But that doesn't mean that astrology is like an undeclared point in Buddhism. It's not. So the undeclared points are not just agnosticism. And so the one with the cosmos being eternal or not, the point is that like it's also related to, does the cosmos have a beginning and an end? Like, is there a beginning to the cosmos? Right? So it's not just because you also are asking, if you're asking if something is eternal, you're asking like, basically, did everything come into existence at some point, or has it always been here? And will it always be here? Or did the cosmos come into existence and cease to exist? And the way that the question is framed, the way that people are thinking about that, is directing the mind in a unwise way, or a way that's not actually directed towards an answer. And the same is true of the other ones. So so the difference being that all conditioned things are impermanent is an empirical question. So the Buddha is saying that empirically, so based off your experience, it is possible for someone to see all conditioned things as impermanent. It's not possible for someone to see if the cosmos is eternal or not. It's not an empirical question. It's a non-empirical question. It's a question that can't actually be answered through empirical means. And so for that reason, the Buddha doesn't answer it, because he's saying you can't go there. You are just wasting your time. It's like asking, well, it's hard to give an exact example, but it's using your mind to think about something which you can't actually properly think about, right? Because any thoughts that you might have about the cosmos, those are just your thoughts. Those are just your images and your impressions. They're not actually, you can't actually access the abstract concept of the cosmos. You can't actually step outside of time and observe if it's always been there or not. That's not possible, because we exist within time. So for a being who exists within time to ask if something exists within or without it, it's already flawed, because it's not actually, it's kind of going beyond what you're experiencing and creating a concept about it and then asking about that concept. And so the Buddha is, that's why he's turning away from those questions in kind of a brief term. So it's different. It's a different type of question from are all things impermanent? Are all conditioned things impermanent? Because are all conditioned things impermanent is looking at your experience, it's looking at your life and seeing, is there anything in here which you can see last forever, or does it not last forever? Right? So does everything, basically, if nothing in your experience, if nothing in your life, if none of it lasts forever, then therefore you can conclude all conditioned things are impermanent. But you can't make conclusions about the cosmos based off that. Okay, and then we have a question from Julie, which I don't see the first part of. You say, why that extra step? I found it very disturbing because my mind couldn't make sense of it. But it looks like the beginning of the question is missing. Am I missing it? So it looks, Julie, like I might be missing your part of your question. So I apologize. If you wanted to put that in there, then you're welcome to. So it looks like I'm missing some of that. And I'm also missing part of Rick's. It looks like some of the questions might be disappearing, because it looks like Rick also has a partial question, which says, it starts with, or is it better to? Yeah, so Rick, I'm also missing your question. So if you wanted to put the beginning of that in, Julie and Rick, then please feel free to retry that. There might have been some kind of error with the internet. Okay, and then Richard says that, let's see. Richard says that he's found the sutta where the Buddha says that even he still applies right effort like destroying. MN 68, Nalakampa. Okay, so great, Richard, glad you found it. Maybe while we're waiting for Rick and Julie, we can just type this in. See if we can find it real quick, and if not, then we could do a future discussion of the sutta. Let's see. Yeah, so I'm not seeing where this. Oh, okay, I see what you're saying, Richard. I found it. Okay, so we have the other questions. Okay, so they're not in yet. So let's take a look at this. So it says the realized one has given up. So the Buddha has given up the defilements that are corrupting, leading to future lives, hurtful, resulting in suffering and future rebirth, old age, and death. That's why after after appraisal, he uses some things, endures some things, avoids some things, and dispels some things. So it's not entirely clear to me, but I think it does say then after this, good, Anuruddha and friends, the Buddha has given up the defilements that are corrupting, leading to future lives, hurtful, resulting in suffering and future rebirth, old age, and death. He has cut them off at the root, made them like a palm stump, obliterated them so they are unable to arise in the future. Just as a palm tree with its crown cut off is incapable of further growth, in the same way, the realized one has given up the defilements so they are unable to arise in the future. That's why after appraisal, he uses some things, endures some things, avoids some things, and dispels some things. So it's possible that it's referring to he dispels some things in the sense that he has dispelled the defilements. Like it doesn't mean he's actively doing it, but that it's just using this collection of things to mean like it's including the fact that he has dispelled the defilements within him. That could be part of the idea. So, like for example, that in general he also partakes of those things because he has removed the defilements, right? So that is the Buddha's explanation here. He says he has cut them off. That's why he does this. So that's one way of interpreting it, but I'm not entirely sure how to interpret it beyond that at this time. It is also possible that this is a kind of an editing thing because the suttas are built out of formulas. So, like for example, this list of using, enduring, avoiding, and dispelling, that is a list, and so it's possible that the list itself has been applied in a place which it should be actually edited in. And sometimes that does happen in the suttas. So there are actually places in the suttas where a list is applied, but the list should not be in full. It's just been because when you're memorizing something, and reciting it orally, then easily you then apply the whole. It's easy to apply the whole stock formula, kind of like you're putting in building blocks. And the particular context can sometimes then over time become ignored because because it just, you lose the subtlety because you're used to reciting the whole thing. You're not used to editing it here, there, here. This sutta it's edited like this, and that sutta it's edited like that. So it's very easy for stock lists to become filled out when they actually shouldn't be per se. So that is one reason why it could be there. If you don't accept the explanation that the removing refers to the fact that he has already cut them off, he's cut off his defilements. And that's the main thing that comes to mind, because I don't think that there's any other thing that I could say about how would the Buddha be dispelling unwholesome states. I don't think I have any other ideas about how that could be. I don't think it makes sense. Okay, so we're having an interesting problem, maybe, where Julie has then put in, why that extra step again, as if it looks like maybe the question is missing, or maybe I'm just misunderstanding. But then Alex has then copied Julie's question and put it in. So I wonder if maybe I'm just misunderstanding. Maybe I'm the one who's misunderstanding. So it looks like it is supposed to say, why that extra step? You found it very disturbing because you couldn't make sense of it. So maybe you mean the extra step of like, why in those traditions do they talk about paranormal practices? And if that is what you're asking, Julie, I apologize if I'm misunderstanding. But if that's what you're asking, then often the idea is that like it's very fancy, it's cool, it's glittery. If someone has psychic powers, right? Like it's very glittery if your teacher or your master, or some famous master, if they have psychic powers, then a lot of people really like that. They find it very interesting and cool, just like a parlor trick. People find that interesting. So often the reason why there is emphasis on that is just because people find it interesting. It's interesting to hear about someone who has paranormal abilities that are above the normal. You're saying it's cutting out the first paragraph. Okay, Julie, the other thing is, I imagine that you might be saying something which YouTube is censoring. So I think that there are certain topics which like Google will automatically censor, maybe. So maybe there's some kind of word in there. So if you look and see, like, is there a word that you're using which would be potentially triggering to a kind of filter online or something, then maybe that could be it. So maybe it's just the phrasing of the question, but I'm not sure. So, okay, I apologize about that. So yeah, if you want to maybe try to rephrase it in a way which would seem neutral and unimposing, then I can try to see. Okay, and then we do have a question here from Carolina, who says that you're feeling stuck in your meditation. A thought arose. It's difficult to purify this mind within the same mind. Could you give me some advice? Okay, so it's hard to give advice on just a statement like you're having a hard time in meditation, or you're feeling stuck in your meditation. It's not really possible to give too much specific advice about that because people can get stuck for many reasons. But in terms of your idea of it's difficult to purify the mind within the mind, yes, that is of course true. And that's why in the suttas, it said that there are there's two factors for the arising of right view. So if someone wants to have right view, in order for someone to get right view, generally speaking, there are going to be two factors that are necessary. The voice of another and wise application of the mind, or proper application of the mind. So two factors, one internal, one external. And then likewise, the Buddha said that kalyana mittata, spiritual friendship, is the whole of the path. And he said that he himself was the example of that he was a spiritual friend, and that we should take him as a spiritual friend, basically. Part of the idea being that we need a spiritual friend to introduce us to what we don't know, right? Our blind spots. So actually, I mentioned this in the morning live stream, that the nature of ignorance is to not know. So it's like if you have if you're hungry, the nature of hunger is not to be full. It's not possible for the two to coincide. Like you can't be both sated and hungry at the same time. You might feel like you are full and hungry, but you can't actually be hungry and full, because hungry is the opposite of being full. So it's a dichotomy, right? Like it's either one or the other. Either you're hungry or you're not hungry. And not hungry means, you're sated. So satiated. So like there's a dichotomy between the two. So ignorance by nature, either we are aware or we're not aware. There is no like in between. There's the process of becoming more aware of what we don't know, but there are always going to be there's always going to be things that we don't know until we know them. Like there's a dichotomy there, right? And so the nature of ignorance is not to know. So it's not possible for someone with ignorance to fully understand that ignorance. Just like it's not possible for someone who is hungry to at the same time be full. It's not possible because they're opposite, right? It's not possible for us who have ignorance. It's not possible at the same time for us to understand fully that ignorance. We can't understand it fully. Otherwise we wouldn't have it, right? Like when we do understand it fully, it will be gone, right? So they can't coexist. So for that reason, yes, it is hard to purify the mind. And that's why the Buddha emphasized the voice of another and spiritual friendship, because those are advisors. The idea being that those are advisors. So essentially advisors, wise advisors, and then secondly, wise application of the mind. That means that we have to then apply our mind to the advice properly, right? So we might get the right advice from someone, but then do we actually apply our mind in the right way in regards to that advice? Or we might be trying to apply our mind in the right way, but if we don't actually have the proper instructions, if we don't have someone point out to us what we need to be looking for, we won't be able to find it, right? So it's kind of like if you're looking for your glasses and they're actually on your face, right? So you might need someone to tell you, like if you can't actually see them, you need someone to tell you, like, have you tried looking at your eyes? Have you tried, testing your eyes? Because if your glasses are really, if they were total, imagine a kind of a pair of glasses, which for the sake of the question, that they were totally transparent. You couldn't see them at all. You didn't feel them or know they were there. And then someone tells you, you need to find the glasses. So you wouldn't know that you have glasses. You would assume you don't. There's no reason that you would think you have them. So you need someone to tell you, have you thought about glasses? Have you thought about the fact that you might be wearing them? So our ignorance is like that. So our ignorance is a lens. It's a way of seeing, like it's a distortion of seeing, right? It's a distortion in our perception, which we don't know it's there. That's the meaning of ignorance. Like we don't know it. We don't know about it. Otherwise we wouldn't be ignorant. So we need someone to tell us, have you considered that you're seeing in this way, in the wrong way? And then we never knew that we don't know that it's possible to see another way unless someone properly points out the proper way. And so if you're feeling stuck, it can be really good to go to an advisor and ask about your meditation. Even if it's something simple, like something that doesn't seem like it needs particularly advanced skills to get through, still we often have blind spots in our own mind. We often have blind spots. And so, yeah, if you're blind to it, you're ignorant to it, you won't be able to see it unless it's pointed out somehow. You can discover certain things on your own if they're more mundane, but it is really good to have a wise instructor, a wise teacher who can help you. And that can include reading the suttas or reading meditation books if you don't have access to a person. That can include trustworthy sources, because those can also, point out things that you might be missing. Okay, and so then Three is following up saying, in-person visits could be Friday to Sunday. Friday, what time? Usually at 5 p.m., but if you fill out an application on our website, so I believe it's emptycloud.org/visit, If you fill out an application on the website, then there should be some information on the residencies there. Okay, so here we have Julie's message. Says she learned about sky burr asterisk asterisk
Sky burial.
sky burr. Okay, so a type of practice. So this is why it's probably okay. So I don't know if I should say it because then I might get then I might get censored. So you learned about this practice and you saw a video. Oh, okay. I see why it's getting blocked now. And you couldn't fathom the reason for why they were um, dealing with the person's body in that way. Am I familiar with the significance? Why not simply let it be? Okay. Why the extra step? You found it very disturbing. Okay, so I understand. Yeah, no worries, Julie. I see why this was being cut off from the. So, uh, actually, from a Buddhist perspective, it shouldn't be, but apparently from the platform's perspective. So, um, yeah, my understanding of the reasoning for that is that, uh, well, I think one is supposed to be a demonstration of the reality of the body, the fact that the body is, um, like I believe that different animals come and they eat the different parts. And I think the idea is that it's supposed to be a demonstration for everyone to really see, like, this is impermanent. It's like right there, right at the funeral. It's like, here's the decomposition right in front of you. Right. So like here, watch the birds eat it, watch the jackals eat it, watch it be, decomposed. So it's like they're intentionally doing that process for you to instruct the people in dharma, to instruct the people like, yeah, the body is over. So it's like the opposite of what we do in America with the embalming and makeup of the body, right? This is the exact opposite of that. So you might say, like, what's the purpose of doing the embalming? It's like, well, the purpose is to build up an attachment and a false sense of permanence. This is the exact opposite. The purpose is to intentionally remove the false sense of permanence and to create a strong perception of impermanence, to create a strong perception of unreliability, of change, and to make it very manifest and clear, like they're gone. Like there's nothing to get attached to. The person is dead. So that's why they distribute the body to the different animals or break it up or whatever, because they're trying to show people like there's nothing to get attached to here. It's just a bunch of impermanent organ. It's just a bunch. It's impermanent. Don't rely on this. Don't expect it to. Don't weep over it changing. Don't weep over it dying. Don't weep over it being decomposing. It's part of nature now. It's back to nature. So I think that that's the idea. It's like to intentionally, the opposite of the embalming. It's like a cultural practice that they have of intentionally demonstrating to everyone like this is over, and to get them to lose the perception that the person is still somehow there or whatever. I think that that's the idea. I assume.
There's also that it's a final gift of giving your most precious thing, your body, to nourish other beings. So
okay, yeah,
that makes generosity.
Okay, yeah. So if you didn't hear that, also one of the other monks was saying that it's also supposed to be an act of generosity, kind of like I guess organ donation, nowadays, in the sense that they're supposed to be like they're giving the after they've already passed away, and then they've made the intention beforehand, or at least maybe the family has afterwards. But the idea being that they're then using their body to do something generous, feed the people, feed the animals. So that's also that makes sense. And then also today is asking, do we have travel help like ride shares? There are some locals who could help if you get in contact with the monastery. If you send an email, we might be able to connect you with the lay supporters who help manage things like that. And there could be people who are arriving or people who are in the area or people who are willing to offer. So there could be the possibility. There could be, yeah. Okay, let's see. So Yeah, and then so I saw Richard's question appeared twice, but it still seemed like a partial question. So I apologize, Richard, but it looks like we might be having a similar problem. Let me just see. Because your question starts with or. So I'll just give it a little bit of time, Richard, if you send that in. And if not, then that may be it for the night. Okay, it looks like there's a question coming in. Okay, so Ryan, so the question is coming from Ryan. Okay, so this might be our last question because it looks like Richard has not said anything yet. Okay, so Ryan, this might be the last question. We'll see, unless someone gets something in briefly. Ryan says, "Is yoniso manasikara necessary for attaining sotapanna?" So as I mentioned in the suttas, yoniso manasikara is one of the factors which is mentioned as a necessary condition for the arising of right view. Meaning, so if someone if they want to attain stream entry, if someone wants to attain the first stage of enlightenment, if someone wants to attain sotapatti, then they will need yoniso manasikara. Okay, so now I see. Now, Richard, your question has come in. Okay, so Richard says, do we need to endure the discomfort, renouncing sensual comforts, so that we are open to letting go of greed and aversion toward the world? Or is it better to discover joy and happiness that can be found in deep meditation, so we can let go of the less satisfying sense world? Okay, so that's a relevant question. Makes sense. And so to put it in, rephrasing it. So do we need to endure the discomfort of renunciation, or should we try to find joy and happiness from meditation? And the answer is both. You have to do both. So even if you find joy and happiness in meditation, you're not always going to be in meditation. And even if you are enduring the discomforts, that might then be a condition for when you meditate to find joy and happiness. So actually, it is it's both. Of course, the quicker you can find nourishment from your meditation, the less discomfort you're going to have to endure generally, because you will have found another source of you won't really be very uncomfortable for you, right? Because you won't really be missing those things. So as I was mentioning to the first question, that if you remove the mind delighting in the experience in the first place, then the unwholesome states like discomfort and longing, that you won't experience those in the first place. You won't experience them arising because you won't have the conditions ready for them. So those are like the ants moving in, right? Why do we get uncomfortable? Why do we get restless and longing? Why do we have desires and so on? It's because we actually enjoy sensual things. We enjoy the world. And so then we remove we intentionally cut it off from ourselves, and then we suffer because one part of our mind actually hasn't let go. So if you let go through meditation, then yes, you might be removing your sense of delight in the first place. You might lose the sense of interest you have in that world. But in order to let go in meditation, you'll have to let go. And that's not going to be easy, because in order to let go, that means that you have to actually have attachments, right? In order to let go of something, you have to be holding it. So that will be the difficult part, is like, can you let go of it? And probably in the process of letting go, you're going to have to do some enduring, right? And also every now and then you might lose the meditation. Even if you do get some, you might lose it. And then you might have to endure some more. So it depends on the time and so on, depends on the conditions. But of course it is, generally speaking, you don't want to just be enduring blindly. That actually isn't really a noble practice, right? Like if you're just, anyone can do that. It's called like a diet, for example. You don't need to be a Buddhist practitioner to do like a water fast, right? Many people do that. So just not eating, for example, foods that you like, that's not enough. So it might be endurance, but that in and of itself is not going to be enough. So generally speaking, endurance is, it has to be done with the right attitude. It has to be done with the attitude of trying to find the peace of the letting go and trying to develop the joy. So yeah, endurance will be a part of it, but you don't want to be inclining too hard towards like uncomfortable endurance. If it's uncomfortable while you're letting go, that's one thing. But if it's uncomfortable without developing a sense of peace, eventually, then that's a bad sign that the mind is not actually enduring properly. It's just gritting its teeth. Yeah. So like, for example, another example of that is in meditation, you might endure through pain in order to try to understand the pain. Well, many people, get tortured with intense pain. They don't understand it. They don't, so just experiencing pain, just enduring pain is not enough. You have to use your wisdom and your mindfulness. And so when you're enduring the withdrawal from sensual experiences, the five senses, you have to use your wisdom and your mindfulness to try to relinquish the craving, not just endure the craving. Okay, it looks like one last question from Ryan that came in the meantime was, what is the difference between yoniso manasikara and kalyanamitta? Is kalyanamitta necessary for someone to attain sotapanna, you're asking, in essence. And so, as I mentioned, but briefly, yoniso manasikara, which means wise or thorough, proper application of mind, that is an internal factor. Kalyanamitta, which is a spiritual friend, spiritual advisor, that's an external factor. So the Buddha said that external factors of external things, that we need wise advisors. And then internally, we need to apply that advice to our experience. And so, yes, both are necessary. All right, so thank you everyone for joining. I hope that you have a good night, good evening, or good morning if it's morning there. And wishing you a good practice. And if you are here for the weekend programs, then we will see you for that.